Before we dive in, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear this, and drop a comment below. Have you ever lived something even remotely close to this? They say there are unspoken rules in life, boundaries you should never cross. But what happens when love doesn't follow the rules? When comfort comes from the last person you're supposed to crave? My name is Hilda Michelle, and I never thought I'd say this publicly, but my mother walked in on me and my father in a moment that was far too intimate for anyone to ever unsee. That was the moment everything shattered. You think you know what infidelity looks like? Think again, because this isn't your typical cheating story. This is a real story of infidelity that goes far beyond physical boundaries. It dives into the darkest corners of emotional abandonment, forbidden confessions, and the kind of cheating that nobody ever talks about out loud. Until now. So listen closely, because once I start, you won't be able to look away. This story will challenge your beliefs, stir your emotions, and maybe, just maybe, uncover something inside you that you've kept buried for years. Let's begin. I grew up watching my mother chase promotions more fiercely than she ever chased memories with me. She was a powerful woman, yes, but somewhere along the way, she forgot how to be present. Her absence wasn't just physical. It echoed in the silence of birthdays missed, school plays unattended, dinners eaten in front of a muted TV. It felt like I lived in a house, not a home. And while she buried herself in boardrooms and business trips, my heart quietly turned to the only person who seemed to notice when I was hurting, my father, Robert. He was always there, soft-spoken, warm, and intuitive in ways my mother had long forgotten. When she started cheating, I didn't find out through a dramatic confession of infidelity. I felt it. Her distance became more bitter, her eyes more restless. And even without proof, I knew that betrayal shifted something deep within me. It was as if her infidelity cracked the foundation of our family, and somehow, I found myself standing next to the only other person left holding the broken pieces. At first, it was just comforting. He'd make me tea when I couldn't sleep, listen to me when I vented about school, hold my hand during those quiet TV nights. It felt safe. But safety, I learned, can be dangerously deceptive. We were both aching, him from being cheated on, and me from growing up emotionally abandoned. And the deeper the wound, the more powerful the bond that forms between those who understand it. You don't really expect your heart to look for love where love isn't supposed to live. But when betrayal, loneliness, and comfort all sit at the same table, the lines start to blur. What began as quiet empathy soon became something else entirely, something I wasn't ready to name, but couldn't stop feeling either. I never imagined that silence could be so loud. The kind that hums late at night, when your mother's out working again, and all that's left is you, your thoughts, and a father who's just as tired of pretending. Our shared solitude became our routine, movies on the couch, walks around the block, even those silly inside jokes only we could understand. And somewhere between those simple moments, something began to shift. I wasn't just looking at my father as a parent anymore. He was becoming something else. He saw me, not just in that parental way, but in a way no one ever had. Like when you've been ignored for so long, and then someone finally listens, really listens, it messes with your mind. His compliments lingered longer, his hugs held tighter. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't start craving it. His attention filled every void my mother's infidelity had carved into my heart. And little by little, the idea of what was right started to blur under the weight of what felt real. There were moments when his hand brushed mine, and I didn't pull away. When his eyes locked with mine a second too long. And those moments, those forbidden confessions wrapped in silence, spoke louder than any words we ever dared say. It wasn't just emotional closeness anymore. There was tension, raw, unresolved tension that sat between us like a secret begging to be unleashed. I kept telling myself it was innocent, that I just needed comfort, that this wasn't a cheating story, it was just a broken family trying to survive. But deep down, I knew better. Infidelity doesn't always start with sex. Sometimes, it begins with a lonely daughter, a neglected husband, and an ache neither of them knows how to soothe. I remember the night so vividly it still haunts me. The air was thick with something unspoken, and neither of us dared to call it what it was. We'd been dancing around it for weeks, maybe months. That slow, magnetic pull that turned every glance into a whisper, every touch into a confession of infidelity we couldn't admit out loud. It started with a hug that lasted too long. Then, his hand found my face, brushing a strand of hair behind my ear. And for the first time, I didn't flinch, I leaned in. We crossed a line that night. Not loudly, not with guilt, but quietly with longing. It didn't feel like a mistake when it happened. It felt inevitable, like every ignored emotion, every act of betrayal by my mother, every night of closeness had led us to this moment. And when our lips met, it wasn't lust, it was grief, masked as passion. A forbidden act born from years of emotional starvation. People talk about cheating in marriage like it's always this calculated, cold decision. But sometimes, infidelity isn't planned. It's stumbled into by two people too broken to know where the lines even are. We weren't father and daughter in that moment. We were just two lost souls, desperate to feel wanted. And when it ended, we didn't speak. We just sat in silence, wrapped in a truth neither of us had the courage to face. The next morning, everything had changed. The way he looked at me, the way I walked past him in the kitchen. There was no more pretending, no more innocent affection or plausible deniability. We had stepped into something irreversible, something that couldn't be undone, only hidden. Hiding it became a second skin. We learned how to speak in glances, how to leave notes folded in laundry baskets, how to find 10 seconds of stolen intimacy behind locked doors. It was like living two lives at once, daughter by day, secret lover by night. And even though I knew it was wrong, I couldn't stop. His presence soothed me in a way nothing else could. It wasn't just physical, it was emotional, spiritual, consuming. This wasn't just a cheating story, it was a desperate escape from everything we had lost. But secrets like ours don't stay buried forever. My mother started noticing. The way he touched my shoulder too gently. The sudden awkwardness when we shared a room. And even though she was guilty of her own betrayal, her suspicions grew. There's a strange irony in that. How someone guilty of infidelity herself could sense it in others so clearly. Every time she questioned us, my stomach twisted, but I lied. Again and again. Just to keep us safe a little longer. There were nights when I'd lay in bed, still feeling his lips on mine, but haunted by the weight of what we were doing. Was this love? Or was it just two broken people clinging to each other for air? The guilt started creeping in, like a shadow that followed us even in our most tender moments. And yet, the more dangerous it became, the more addictive it was. It was our secret rebellion against the pain the world had thrown at us. I knew we couldn't live like this forever. We were holding a flame in our hands, pretending we wouldn't get burned. But the heat was rising. The lies were piling up. And somewhere deep inside, I could feel it, something was going to give. Because no matter how tightly we held onto each other, the weight of what we were hiding was only growing heavier. It didn't happen with a fight or some dramatic explosion. It was a quiet morning, too quiet. He sat across from me, coffee untouched, eyes distant. I knew something was off. He didn't have to say a word. I could feel it in my bones. And when he finally spoke, his voice trembled. "We can't do this anymore."
Just like that.
My world, the only part of it that had felt real, started to crumble. He said it wasn't because he didn't love me. That was the part that shattered me the most. He did love me, but he loved me too much to let me stay in a fantasy that would one day destroy us both. He'd been waking up in the middle of the night, guilt choking his chest. Our secret had become a prison, and the weight of our choices was crushing him. This wasn't just a confession of cheating, it was an awakening, one that came at a painful cost. He told me he was leaving for Seattle, said he needed to find a way back to being my father, and that maybe distance was the only way. I didn't scream. I didn't beg. I just stared at him, trying to memorize every line on his face, as if that would make the goodbye hurt less. But nothing could soften the blow of knowing the only person who truly saw me was about to walk away. And yet, even as I felt the walls close in, a part of me still believed it wasn't over. That this story of infidelity, of love, of longing, of forbidden confessions, still had another chapter to write. Because how do you let go of the one person who made you feel alive in a world that constantly made you feel invisible? When he left, something inside me broke. It wasn't just heartbreak, it was abandonment all over again. The same ache I used to feel when my mother ignored me now returned, but worse. Because this time, it came from the one person who had loved me in a way no one else ever had. I didn't want to believe it was over. I couldn't. And so, I clung to the only thing I had left, hope. Dangerous, consuming, irrational hope. I sent messages he didn't answer. Called late at night just to hear his voice on voicemail. I told myself it was love, that what we had couldn't be erased by distance or guilt. And I'll admit it, I tried everything. Subtle innuendos, photos I shouldn't have sent, words drenched in longing and pain. It was more than a confession of infidelity. It was a desperate plea for connection, for validation, for something to fill the void he left behind. But he held the line. Each time I reached out, he pulled back further. He told me, gently but firmly, that we couldn't go back. That his love for me would always exist, but it needed to transform. "You're not my partner," he said. "You're my daughter." And that has to mean something again. I hated how much sense it made. I hated that I couldn't hate him. And most of all, I hated how alone I felt in the aftermath. Still, I kept believing that maybe with time, he'd change his mind. That maybe this wasn't the end of our story of infidelity, of cheating, of emotional chaos. Because when you've tasted a kind of love that makes you feel alive again, even the smallest echo of it is enough to make you chase ghosts. The last time I saw him, there was no drama, just the aching quiet of acceptance. He stood at the door, suitcase in hand, eyes heavy with everything we couldn't say. I wanted to scream, to beg, to make him stay. But all I managed was a whisper. "Please." He smiled, a sad, fatherly smile, and said, "I love you, Hilda. But this love needs to change, or it will destroy us both." And just like that, he was gone. The silence that followed wasn't the kind I'd known before. This one had weight. It wasn't about absence anymore. It was about the presence of consequence. Every look we shared, Every hidden touch, every moment of cheating hidden behind closed doors, it all led to this goodbye. And I realized something no one had ever taught me. Not every kind of love is meant to be fulfilled.
Some are meant to teach.
To wake us up. To break us open. He didn't erase me. He didn't hate me. But he reclaimed his role as a father, and in doing so, forced me to see myself again. Not as a lover, not as a secret, but as a woman who needed to heal. Our story of infidelity wasn't just about betrayal. It was about losing ourselves in the chaos of what felt right, but wasn't. And now, all I had left were memories. Memories too heavy for someone my age to carry, but still, I carried them. And even now, I sometimes wonder if he thinks of me the way I still think of him. Not with shame, but with tenderness. With the understanding that we got lost, and that choosing to walk away was the bravest thing he ever did. But something tells me that wasn't the end. Not of everything. Now that you've heard it all, take a breath. Let it sink in. Because this wasn't just a forbidden confession. It was a reflection of something deeper. A story of infidelity wrapped in loneliness, desire, and emotional scars most people are too afraid to confront. But here's the truth. Sometimes, the real betrayal isn't what happens between two bodies, it's what we do to ourselves when we ignore our pain just to feel something. So, I ask you, what are you running from? What kind of love have you convinced yourself is harmless because it fills a void no one else has touched? This wasn't just a cheating story. This was a mirror, a wake-up call. Because when you ignore what's broken, you end up repeating the cycle disguised as affection. How many moments have you kept hidden? How many times have you crossed a line, not out of lust, but out of sheer emotional hunger? This story may be mine, but the truth behind it, it's ours. This is what real infidelity and cheating often look like. Raw, messy, and dangerously human. Speech balloon if this touched something in you. Don't leave in silence. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Like this video, share it with someone who needs this message, and subscribe to the channel. Hit the notification bell because this is just the beginning. There's so much more to uncover, and we're doing it together.